Okay, so we've got a really interesting topic with skies this week, and as we've just been chatting about, they, they really vary in one approach and two, like all the different ways we can actually do it. But I think probably one of the key things say, one of the key focuses, as well as just really experimenting with all the different techniques. So one of the things with skies is contrast. So we get some really interesting effects by kind of getting on some brights and some neutrals or some darks and lights and brights. It's just really interesting if we play with colour. So don't worry too much if you're not getting exact colours, but don't be frightened of going in with some really bright ones. Like I've got this bright pink here. Now I can mix some pinks and things, but don't be frightened of really going for it with the colour. Because it just surprises us sometimes how interestingly it can turn out when we do that. We've got this one, which is very dark, and then we've got these wispy clouds. So the other thing I'm going to just say about, and then these two are a more similar palette, but quite different in the fact we've got the sun rays, and quite different in the fact we've got some wispy and some a bit more built up, and then we've got these sunsets coming underneath as well. So one of the things to think about is definitely the contrast. And even here, the contrast, they might not be really bright, but actually what we've got the opposite end of the spectrum of colours, got cools and warms, oranges and blues, and that actually creates contrast itself. So contrast is one. The other is how we get the effect of clouds building up. And I'll show you some techniques for building up cloud cover. But then it's very different. For example, for mist, it gives a very different feel to kind of how cloud is more heavily built up. And direction. So looking at the direction of the way the cloud or the mist spreads across the sky is really helpful for us. And I've got some tips and techniques for kind of getting those, moving things around a little bit in an interesting way. And as I said, you might want a separate bit of paper to really just test some of these things in advance if you want to, rather than wait until you get it onto your paper. Or you might just want to go for it on your paper. Either way, it's absolutely fine. So, and then softness is the other key, I would say. So, as well as obviously using the acrylic, and I'll talk through kind of like some ways of approaching that. But yeah, so it's how we get the softness with the different types of cloud as well. How we get some of them to be more like opaque and cover, and how we get some of them to be a bit more, I mean, they're not going to be transparent, are they? But how we get some of these areas a little bit more translucent so we still get some of the colour coming through. So that's an interesting thing to think about. So there's maybe a few things like, the softness and the style of the cloud, the contrast of colours, and then the movement, I would say, are the three key areas. So I'm just going to move this one and this one out. I'm going to start with this one, and then if I have some time, we'll come on to this one too. Um, I've gone for this one because I think sometimes perhaps that one's slightly more difficult in some ways. This one has still got lots going on, and the difficulty here is in the rays, and I'll show you a little bit about that. So in terms of colour, the one thing with acrylics is often, if we're often when we're building a picture up, we build up in layers. And we can still do that with the acrylic paint. We can even let areas dry if we want to, or we can blend as we go and kind of get the softness as we go along. More often than not, we put the dark bit down first, but obviously with the clouds, we've got to be really careful that that's not our background layer, because actually we want to show the cloud as it is. So in some areas, we might build that darker layer up a little bit over the top even, and get those lighter ones in behind. Unless, of course, your bank of cloud, say at the bottom here over the land, is quite dark. So yeah, so we have to really flip a lot of the rules on the head when it comes to skies. I really do think, and just go with it. There's a lot of the variables with the acrylic paint are things like how warm your room is. And I know I mentioned this morning because it was really warm this morning and it was drying very fast. So if you're wanting to work and get some colours into each other, then what we need to be able to do is make sure we've got those colours ready and mixed up. And that's what I would really recommend, is we get those up. Now, some areas, if we're not careful, if we mix together the opposite scale. Like if we're kind of trying to blend in whilst wet with like say blue and yellow, we are going to get that green sky. So it may well be we have to get some of those bands in behind and let them dry a little bit. And also our paper will reach capacity with how much wet paint we can put on before we do it. So you'll just have to have a go, and it's kind of really, really helpful lesson in itself. So when you as you're doing it, if it does, the thing to remember is don't worry, because once something has dried, you can put more on top with lighter or darker. So that's the great thing about it. But yeah, we can make things blend, but we may need to just hold fire and just like let some things dry off a little bit before we add another one. So something like this, I'd be thinking about what kind of colours are in here. And I'm going to look at like the light colours. So definitely with a tint, I'm just going to line my colours up on here. And we get plenty of white out because I'm going to be using that to blend some things. I'm also going to use plenty of brights as well. As I said before, if you want to use some colours, if you've got any in your kit that are bright, then just use those as they are. Like this one, a pink or like that, I would probably just put straight onto it. And other colours I might use to blend. So I'm thinking about the blues as well. I'm going to go in, you can go in with, this one is more, I would probably use more of an ultramarine and a tiny bit of either cerulean, which is more turquoisey, or a tiny bit of phthalo with some white. But I'm going to go in mainly, I think, with this phthalo blue. I won't need as much of it as I do the white to kind of get it in. And I'm also going to use a much darker colour, Payne's Grey, for this really dark cloud to build that up there. I'm going to make sure my blues stay well away from on my palette from my warms, because I don't want to kind of like get those two mixing together. So with that, I can probably mix a good few colours up for this background in here, because this is almost a little bit brighter as well over here, isn't it? Like, so it's kind of, you've got these light colours and it's deciding what goes first, really. Then we've got the overlap of some of these areas here. And then the overlap of all of those warm colours almost come over the top, don't they? And then at the bottom, we've got these bands of things. So I'm going to go straight in with pink, but if you want to use a red, in fact, I think what I'm going to do, because I've got such a small palette here so that I can show everybody, I'm going to heat that with my blues. I'm going to have another small bit of palette here that's got bright in it. I'm going to use that straight, but if you're wanting to think of a red for your bright pink, you may even have like a purpley colour, like a magenta, like that, mixed with a pink that might actually give you a better colour. Mixed with a white tint that might give you a better colour. Or it's going to be difficult to get that colour, the intensity of it straight from a red. So what you can do is you could almost add like a little tiny bit of a yellowy colour, just to kind of make it a bit more peachy, and not very much white at all is what I would say with that. So what else have we got? But again, I'm going to mix these colours up and test them anyway. And I don't really need to do this too much yet, because I can actually just work as I go. Although I might get a little bit of it just kind of ready to go on over the top. And then these lovely peachy colours, but again, it just depends. So whatever you can see as well, that's the really important thing, because we'll all be looking differently. For this peachy colour, I'm going for a warmer red, like a Cajun red, similar to the colour actually it was different to the colour we used last week, wasn't it? Because it was a warmer one. We used Alizarian Crimson last week, which is more on the cool tone, but I'm going in with the warms here. And so I've got a warmer red, or even like a scarlet or something that's a bit more, I suppose it depends on the colour scarlet in everybody's kit. Sometimes it varies. So just look for a woman. And I'm going in with Acadian yellow to mix to make a peachy colour in there. But again, it depends on what we can all see, because everybody will see different things. I'm also just going to play with a little bit of a violet colour. I may not use it, so I'm just going to pop a little bit out. I'm going to put that on my blue spectrum actually over on this palette. but you don't have to, you can pop it on there, it's fine. I'm just trying to keep my blues a little bit more on there. And then we've got these other really bright colours in here, like we've got a really, really, really light yellow. So you could go for like a lemon yellow if you've got one of those in your kit, which is slightly different hue to, that one's not working. Slightly different colour tone to, a bit harder to something. A slight brightness to the Cajun yellow, but if you haven't, if you've only got one yellow, you can warm the Cajun yellow up. Sorry, if you've got one yellow, say you've got lemon yellow or something, you can warm it up with a bit of red if you want to kind of get a peachy effect. And then you can add white. So just seeing if I've got some just that's fine. I'm just going to add a little bit more yellow and then I can use some to lighten with a white, which is absolutely fine. Or you might have something called Naples yellow, um, which is a kind of a dull, like a more dull yellow. So I'll just show you what that looks like. This is Naples yellow. A lot of people do use these for kind of sunsets because they don't want, they don't want like this behind here. They don't want the intensity, but you can just, you can mix your own yellow down with with some white really, just to kind of dull it down. And you can then, to get these more Naples yellow, just put a tad of ochre in it, a really small amount, and that works as well. But I'll keep talking through it as we go. Now then, before I start mixing anything, what I will say is, so this is the interesting thing. So I have actually sat, because I do, like, I've done quite a lot of skies, but not totally in focus, in detail. So I thought I'd be quite interested myself to see how other artists do it. So I've had a little look around this weekend, and so I've got some really great tips to pass on as well for that, from that reason. So I'm going to show you a few little bits and pieces here, because this is what some artists have been followed do, which is totally different to what I do, but quite interesting. And we've had a bit of a play with some of these this morning. So that is one tool, a piece of kitchen roll with some water in it. A little artist sponge is another one. And these are all things that people soften down the edges of the clouds with, not really in the middle, but kind of around the edges to soften them down. So I've just got those two things to start with. The other tool is this, which is a finger. So it's weird. One of the artists I was looking at who does a lot of skies was really interesting in acrylics, and she just softens the edges and everything down with her finger and moves the paint. It was absolutely fascinating. So I have really quite enjoyed demonstrating with my finger today, and I'll do a little bit of it. And I think it is really interesting, especially if you do really like pastels, you'll probably really relate really well to that. And if you don't, if you're not sure about pastels yet, if you found you like doing this, using your finger to do a little move the clouds around, then you probably quite enjoy doing the pastels as well. And if you don't want to get your finger in anything, that's absolutely fine. So there's those. Then I've got little mop brush. We were talking about blusher brushes and things last week. So that can really kind of thin down the edges. The biggest thing with the mop brush is not to absolutely soak it. So it's fine to make it a little bit damp. Some people use it dry completely to move the car. And this is the difference. Some artists use it really dry, and I have tended to do that particularly with oil, which is understandable. I don't add thinners and stuff to move it around. But and in acrylics, it's similar. So some people use it completely dry and some people just use it a little bit damp. If you totally soak it, what will happen is it just gets really sodden and you kind of end up like you lose the softness of it, which is what the nice thing about kind of softening down the edges is. So that's entirely up to you, have a little play with it. And then I've just got like a nice flat brush. You can use any big bushy brush to get that on with. That's absolutely fine. And you can always, if you really wanted to use your blending brush to do it, you can dampen it, and then you can always dry it right off to get the extra softness around it, and really dry it off with a kitchen towel. So there's a lot going on, a lot to think about, but it would be really lovely to just get in there and kind of, it's very interesting with this one. So I'm just going to mix up my paint with a little bit of water. I'm just looking for my palette knife, which is in my bag. So, and this is the other thing. So the underlayers, when we're looking at these underlayers, they don't necessarily need to be very thick. If you're so what I would suggest, if you're in a warm space, make sure you get plenty on so you can move it around on you. So thicken up a little bit. Don't go too thin, I would say. But you may need to, as I mentioned before, you may need to just kind of um, get it in while if you're wanting the edges to blend. It won't be a problem to let the edges of the blue and the blue blend in a little bit. You can just kind of like go in a little bit with it because they're the same tone, so it's not going to get really muddy unless you're kind of scrubbing it up together. So we'll go in and start to look at where the patches are there. So I'm just going to pop a little bit of water with my brush over the top because and again, this is a learning curve depending on how your paint behaves. So a lot of this is just getting used to your paint. So I'm just going to bring a little bit off. So I'm going to go for this medium tone over here. Now you might have a colour like, for example, cobalt blue or ultramarine blue. You might want to bring a little bit of that in it as well. So there's no limits really, to be absolutely honest, as to what you do. So I'm going to look for this kind of medium tone here and this light, and I'm going to go in with that first and then bring this over a little bit. But then I'm also mindful that I've got these peachy colours, which I am going to add in after because I don't want those to all be so blended that they're going to make this colour very blue. So just going to get a little bit of that, a little bit of this phthalo as well, because that's going to give it a real kind of richness, I think. And again, you've got a bit of paper. Once you've mixed up a bit of your colour and you're happy with it, you can really get in there and test it. And to add in a little bit of, just a small bit of white to start with and build up. Sometimes it can totally take out your, like the natural kind of a glow. Some more in until you're happy with what you've got, really. Okay. Now I'm already seeing I'm favouring putting a little bit more of this colour in because it's a little bit more turquoisey. So this is kind of like underneath here. That's where I'm going to use that. But I'm just going to test it first just to see if I like the colour. I'm just going with a really small brush to test it. Yes, I'm really happy with that. And a lot of this is whether you really connect with it. So if you think, oh, I just really like that shade, then use it. Again, this is how we're interpreting the sky. It's not, we don't need to do an exact copy of make it entirely accurate. It's almost also really important to choose the colours that you really connect with there. So right, so I'm going to go in with a really light tint now, and I'm just going to do that just with, see that, I'll just move that one across, just with a little bit of this phthalo, and I'm going to go in with much more. Yeah, much more white here. It's a little bit of the other blue on there, but I'm not worrying about that. I quite like it anyway. So I've almost got this. I'm going to mix a bit more. Let's get all that in. That's lovely. It's really, so we're going to get a nice contrast between a lot of these colours. And then I'm going to go even lighter as we get further down here because that's all underneath. I won't be able to do that once we start overlapping the other colours. I'm just going to take a little edge here, just make that even lighter. And this is where it's beautiful when you just get all these gorgeous colours in here. Okay, so again, I just want to keep testing to see if I'm happy with all of these. That's looking like I'm happy with it. Yeah, like that. Not much contrast between those two, so I'm going to make it even, add even more white in there. Sometimes it's a real subtle change anyway. And other times you think, actually, I think I'll add a little bit more in of a colour in. It's quite useful just to have a go testing it. Oh, that feels a bit better. Okay. And I'm also going to bring in a really dark color. So I've got Payne's Grey here, which is a really dark blue. But if you haven't got that, you could try a combination of something like a blue and a purple or something like that, like a blue and a darker violet, you know. I've got this one here, which is darker than the one I've got there. Yeah, that's much more violetty there. So you can go in with, you know, that colour and another colour. That colour and a blue together, you know, and that will be dark. So we can test that, see if it works. With that, I haven't got the white in there. That's probably not the best idea, but it's getting, you see how dark, much darker that is now we've added, and it's just exploring and playing with. It's just exploring and playing with different amounts of each colour. So if I take that on there, we should get a really nice, yeah, so that's gone really much darker. It's not quite as dark as that, but it's still nice. You know, you can just think, right, what shall I add a bit more of? Or I'll add a bit more purple to that. That takes it down a little bit. Get in there, and you can always add a bit of, say, of brown or something like that in there as well, if that helps. Okay. So I'm going to just go in here now. I'm just washing, making sure these brushes are really clean now. We don't want that, you know, we don't want it transferring to the warm colours once I'm mixing those. So I've got a fair few mixed up there. I'm just going to mix up this Payne's Grey because that's the one. But I'm going to not use all of it, so I might use some of it at the top again. Yeah, so I'm just going to use that fairly straight, I think, as it is. Yeah, I'm just using it as it is there. I might even have just actually, might use it with a bit more depth by adding purple to it in some of the very darkest areas of there. That will make it even darker. Or it changes the depth. Yeah, it's making it a bit more purple, but I quite like that. Okay, so yeah, so we're working through this process really of just seeing if we enjoy the colours. So I'm going to go in and just do this top area first. Oh, she says, now I'm looking, this is where we need to really look, because when I'm looking here, a lot of this cloud here, even though it's dark, it's overlapped here by the pink, but actually behind it is the yellow. So I'm not going to go in yet. Actually, I'm going to come in and get some of these yellows, and I'm going to put those, lay those down first, because otherwise this will overlap and we won't be able to kind of to do that. So I'm going to move my dark palette of blues, my cools, and bring this one over. I'm just going to change my water, so I'm not using the blue one. And again, I'm just make sure that everything's out of the bristles. Just give the bristles a good clean, because they sometimes stores in the bottom there. And I'm looking now at these colours I want behind at the bottom. So I am going to go for Naples Yellow. Now you can see, this is the other interesting thing. This is why it's really important to just to get used to using the paints that you've got, because this one is a different brand and it's what we call a heavy bodied acrylic. So it's really thick. So to actually get that to move, I do need to add more water than I do to the other one. So it's just very interesting, you know, how they behave. Now, on its own, I think that's going to be too dark for me. Well, that's okay, actually, but I might just add a very small amount. So over this side, I'm going to use more of a Naples yellow, but as we come over, there's a few light bits, but I'm going to use much brighter yellow as a contrast as we come down there. So just give this white I'm just trying to make sure I don't transfer any of that blue onto this side. So hopefully that'll be okay. So I'm just going to add a little bit of white into that Naples yellow just to line it up again even more. So you'll see with this is the only colour on that, one of the only colours on there that doesn't have like it's quite dull, isn't it? It's much more dull, which sometimes quite helps balance out if you've not got all bright colours. So as I said, if you haven't got Naples yellow, you can get there really easily with yellow and white and a very touch of yellow ochre, because yellow ochre is very earthy, so it will bring down the brightness of the yellow. I'm still mixing up to decide if that's okay. Yeah, let's test it again. Okay, it's getting there. We can do that quite a lot with colours. We can take the brightness out of them by adding an earthy tone for different situations. Quite often to make a stone colour, you can put white and ochre together and then just put a tiny bit of ultramarine brown. Right, so I think I'm happy with that colour. Quite like that. Yeah, it's whether you like it as well. And we've got some lights on their own over here, and then there's an awful lot going on, isn't it, with the layers? Now, this bottom layer is much more simplified because it's on its own. So we can take that whole thing as a separate entity, really. It's just what's above it we have to kind of have a little look at there. So we've got this yellow still behind it, isn't it? And then these other little clouds and things over the top. So I'm quite happy just going in with those few colours to start with and just start to get them in. And I may leave this little bit for the moment and then come back to it because that's got some bright yellows and some other yellows in. So I'm going to come back to that bit. Right, so let's have a little look. Okay, all this palette full of colour. So I'm going to go in with these this light colour first and this other colour and kind of get that gradient out there, and then I'm going to start to work in some of those blues. Sorry, I'm not actually. I'm going to go in with this yellow, as I said I was going to go in with, and then I'm going to go in with the blue. So sorry about that. I'm just talking myself around in circles tonight. So let's just going to draw or just actually mark it in with the brush what comes above. So just where I'm just going to draw in a little line because I'm paint over this anyway. It's one of the things when we do skies, we don't really need too many kind of much information really. Like we don't need too many sketches beforehand or anything like that. So I'm going to go in with a nice just kind of a flat and use on each side. So I just a flat brush like this. You can get thin ones and bigger ones. So I'm going to go in, just load up my brush. Now this one hasn't got too much blending in it, this area here. So I'm just going to, and I'm not going to be blending the other colours that are coming over the top to it. So I'm not worried about that staying wet to blend it at all. I'm just going to get it in. Even those other clouds come over the top, those purpley ones. Just want to make sure I've got it coming down so it's in there. And we've got these other colours coming behind and everything, but I'll tackle that separately as we come over that way. What I might just do is, because I can see some brights under there, is just to pop a little bit of just with this, just in a kind of line, because this is the other thing, we get that kind of band of cloud that almost feels, doesn't it, like it's kind of brushing up. So you can even do that. You can kind of go, I'm just going to brush up this cloud like it's going up. And this is just a bit of white and some of the same color that I've used. So I'm just kind of dragging that. We're just observing really what's going on. Some of this cloud feels like it's rolling, doesn't it? So sometimes we don't always need to soften the edges down. It's more, I think, when you get the mists and the rolling clouds or the edge where it's wispy. So I'm just kind of going in with there for the moment, not worrying too much about that. All right, so I'll just wash that off. Excuse me. I'm going to, while my water is still quite clean, I'm just going to dampen the edge of this to try it. Just keep it, just a bit of kitchen roll. And then we can kind of, if we want to do any softening as we go, we can. I'm going to do the same with my bit of sponge there. Just dampen down the edge a little bit that I'm going to use while it's clean water. There we are. So it's really soft and spongy now. Right. Put a very small amount, just dampen the edge of my fan brush as well in advance. And then just think about getting these undercolours. So make sure this brush is really clean. And again, it's the same thing the other way around. So if we've got a yellow braced brush and it's got the yellow in, it will still turn the other colours a bit more green. So we want to get that out in reverse as well. So now I'm going to come back to that blue palette and start to think, make sure that these are going to be damp enough. So I'm just going to put a little bit of water so that I know I can move it around enough. And I'm going to go in with this kind of mid-tone. And again, it's an experimentation because you won't always know how much to put on. You know, how much do I actually need to get that colour in where I want it. Now I've got more water on mine, so you can see it's making those lines. I can get rid of those in a moment if I want to. But yeah, we don't really know. We're kind of experimenting how much we put on there. I'm going to go in with that for the moment. And then I'm going to go in with the other colour. I'm going to go in a bit thicker with this one. But yeah, just really enjoy it because it's a lovely experience actually. I'm layering up these a little bit, just where I think it's kind of rolling out like that underneath. And it's kind of spreading out a little bit. And I might have to put some back over that darker colour as well at some point. And then I'm going to go in with that very light colour as well and start to add elements of that in. Now, again, we've got just be a bit mindful because we'll start to reach capacity with our colours as well. I brought my blue a little bit further down than is in there. There. So whilst it's damp, I'm just going to start from light and go a bit darker. So I'm just going to soften it all into each other, just at the edges. I'm not bothering, because what you can end up doing if you're not careful is kind of lifting it off. But I want that to just move. You can bring it out over the top. You can, because again, you know, it'll change again once we get some of these dark colours in that overlap this way. So, you know, I can even bring some of those just a bit over the lighter ones. I'm just loading up the brush. Now, it's not going to look finished for quite a while, so that's the other thing to expect. It's going to look a bit feel funny. Our brain likes to see finished things, and it's not. So it does play tricks on us, gets us to look at it and think, no, it's no good. So here we go. So I'm just bringing in those lovely colours and just kind of tapping the edges of them, just to get them to blend a little bit. But I'm not going to go in with these warm colours over the top because it will just be a big muddy mess. Not careful. But yeah, feel free to bring in any colours that you want to from there. So then I am going to go in with this area over here. I'll wipe that off a little bit. I'm going to go in with this very dark colour now. This should be dry. Yeah, I'm going to make sure this is dry. I'm not scrubbing into that area. So going in with this Payne's Grey. I am just going to wipe off anything that's a bit light coloured. Because again, it will lighten the colour if I'm wanting it to be a bit darker. You know, you can make a variety, you know, a variation of colour between. So, oops, oh well, don't do what I've just done though. I'll have to paint over that again in a bit because I've just taken that off by accident. I'll just use my sponge actually just to kind of quickly wash it off. I've dragged the bottom of the palette over it. You can put, you know, use a midway between the colours as well if you want him to. So it's building this up. And again, I'm going in with it damp enough that it's going to move really quite easily and it's not going to be too sticky. So plenty of paint and, you know, not so much so it's kind of running everywhere, but just so it's moving really easily. So I'm going here. I'm kind of, what I'm trying to do while I'm doing it, it is going to look patchy, but I'm just kind of wishing it about with the edge, you know, getting some of these shapes in. And as I said, it doesn't matter if you're going over another colour that's the same tone. It's not going to cause any difficulty really there. What I can do, you see, is deepen this area of colour as well as we go. A bit in the dark, right in the corner there. Bit in this corner here. So I'm just working, you know, we're just looking around, aren't we, at seeing what lies where. I'm going to go in with my other colours around that area. And I'm getting these really directional lines. Now you might want the directional lines, you might not. So it's just go for it and just see, put it on nice and thickly. I might put now a bit more of this lighter blue in there, but I'm still building up this. And I'm going to go in with some of these areas are darker. So what I might need to do is if it's kind of reached capacity, I'm just going in more thickly with this paint over the top where it's a bit darker there. Before it changes, put plenty of paint on. And then again, I can still just kind of like, we've still got that other colour on there, just kind of soften it down. Now, I'm going to give my brush a little bit of a wipe off so it's not transferring too much colour. You can do this with the edge of your brush, kind of dampen it down over the edges so it's a bit softer. Or, I'm just trying to keep it moving actually. So that's like, gives it much softer feel near the edges here. Or, you can try a little bit of this rag and just kind of, you know, actually soften that. So I'm just going to just dampen the bottom here, only the edges because it can take it back off if you're not careful. And just, that's another way of softening things down. Try that. Or you can add a little bit more, add a bit on your finger. I'm going to add a little bit of another colour as well, so it's not just all dark. And lighten it off with a bit of this lighter colour. You know, just have a go at literally just softening that down and moving the paint around like that as well whilst it's still damp. That's quite interesting. You can move it in that direction as well. So we just, you know, we're still building this sky up. I'm just going to go back in now. While it's still dark, go a bit dark at the top. I quite like that effect where it's quite moody and dark. It's nice. And then go back in. I'm going to go back in and get some of those other brighter colours. I've just noticed that there's more of that. And I've taken, I would like it lighter, not all dark. So go back in with some of this lovely blue here. And I've just pulling it over the top there. So it does feel like, it does feel like this nice loose. And this is where we have to look, what bit overlaps what, is there any light? And there is a little bit of that cloud here. So I'm just kind of getting it to pull slightly. So same again, decide on how you want to soften the areas. I am going to go in with this because I do love these little brushes. Just make sure you've cleaned off anything that you don't want to transfer. And you can you can top up your paint in one colour on it as well, just a little bit. As long as it doesn't get saturated with paint, that's the thing. I'm building in just this colour back in again there. Maybe just the edge, just soften those edges. Make sure I put some bright back in there. So, we can just keep exploring how that feels. It's really nice, isn't it? Isn't it lovely? I'm going to go back in with some of the light ones now. It may get a bit more saturated, so I may have to just kind of slow it down a little bit, but I'm just building that in over at the top there. No. And you can bring in the other colours as well over the top, so you can bring in some of that darker. I'm going to have to just give my brush a wipe over and make sure it's not getting too clogged with paint. That can then stop it working effectively. So I don't want to do that. I'm going to go back to just popping in a little bit more of this dark across the top that I can, try it with again, try that with your finger, see how that goes. I just kind of dab it like the pad of your finger. See how that works. Right, so I'm now exploring around this area because we've got some quite light colours and it feels like it's going a bit lighter towards the middle. So I'm going to do that. Pulling some of these colours, but I've got kind of with a combination of both there, the darker and the lighter one. Drop the water on there. So again, it almost sometimes looks like, doesn't it? We're having to restart. It's like, oh, crikey. But it's not. It's just building up. We will put other layers to put over the top of there as well. There we go. I won't stop for a moment and pause because whilst we're in the throw of something, we want to be making sure that we can blend it and not stop. If otherwise we might not be able to blend it once we've stopped because it might dry too fast. So catching the light at the moment. Again, I'm going to go in with some overlayers over here as well. And this is coming down. So, I'm kind of just going in, but you can pop it on with anything that you want to. And we've got, obviously, those pinks and purples and things to go in there as well. I'm just kind of dabbing in a little bit, just some of that darker colour back in again. But you know, it's a whichever one you choose, it's kind of a work in progress because you just start to see other things as well. Now that's more kind of blendy at the edges here. Feels to me it's quite soft still, so I'm just going to go pop in some of these other colours. And again, just yeah, you can even kind of make drag marks up with your finger, like just pull it up like that. See what happens there as well. Because we do often get that kind of cloud formation, don't we? It's a bit like stratus, but it's more kind of mist. So yeah, so just exploring really. And then as we go, we build in the next bit and the next bit, it'll start to feel more. At the moment, you may well be feeling like, oh gosh, it really feels a bit strange at the moment, and that's absolutely fine. We're just getting in some of those layers so that we can kind of leave it and come back to it, if that makes sense. You know, you can, as I said, just try that little kitchen roll trick or have a go. I mean, what I'd like to do is like work in some of these areas where it feels that in at the edges it's a bit darker. So I'd quite like to just go in and get that feel, the sense. I still want it to move, so I'm going to use my brush a little bit more here. Feel like it's actually moving. Not everything needs to be blended all the time. See your brush work. Oops, Daisy, sorry. Top of my camera with the brush. There we go. And then I'm just like observing some of the bits, but we'll have to kind of just build up those layers when we can see them. So I am just going to add a tad more paint so that I can actually blend a tad more at this edge. And I'm just going to leave that there because that's the other thing is to, how do we decide where we're going to stop? And that's the biggest thing for people is to say, right, we'll just stop where you feel like you've got to, you've got to where you can with it for now, because we've still got all these other colours and things to weave in. So I'm just going to wash out with my brush. I'm actually going to use a dishcloth or a flannel or something, or a wipe if you've not got that, and just wipe off all of that because it's starting to get a bit waylaid with paint way down. And then to dry it, I'm just going to use a bit of kitchen roll. There we go. So, thinking about what else we've got around here and how we're going to make that work as well. So some cloud just sit, doesn't it? Like in waves, like under here, we've got these lovely pinks, but they're quite muted. And over this side, we've got all of these brights, which seem to come on top here. And then this really bright bit is kind of under. So there's lots of layers going on here with the other. So I think I'm going to go in down this end. Just stay away from this area for a moment. Make sure I've washed my brushes. I've certainly got the blue out there because this is the danger zone really where we're using the blue brush. And if there's any left in it, so again, you can just use a bit of something to get that out so that when you go into your yellow, it doesn't turn it green. Or if you've got another similar brush, use a different brush if you want. That avoids it altogether. So I think I will just take a pause there and see how everyone's getting on. Okay, so we're pretty much at that messy stage where we think, is this going to work out? And yes, it will. It will just keep going with it. And we're exploring and enjoying. We're not really thinking about what's going to happen at the end. Because we've got there's so many little layers and things to put on first, which is good. It gets us out of the habit of worrying about it or anything. So what we'll be looking at next, really, what I'm looking at is like what's the next layer back through above this line. So I'm taking that area totally separately. It's nice to actually get the sky in done first, actually, before we get the water in, simply because with all the colours, you can see how that reflects in the water once you've got the colours in the sky. So again, it just, every composition with sky is so different. So what we're looking at is, you know, which is this next layer coming in, and we have got this cloud sitting over the top. Some of this, it's almost a bit lilac-y actually, sitting over the top, over the edge of this darker one. We've got these brighter colours overlapping in the sky up here as well. But I'm actually going to take it, I'm going to do two separate things. What I'm thinking about now is where things are drying and where I need them to dry. So for example, the yellows, I want them to dry before I start coming back down over them, because I don't want a muddy, like green sky, but mixing the blues and the yellows, or the violets and the yellows. So I'm going to take this little area here when I'm looking, thinking, well, if we start here, that's great, but we still need to overlap here. So I'm going to work down here, let this area dry like that, because that is quite patchy anyway. It's not really soft, is it? And then I can take that area next, that comes over the top of it, but at least we'll have done it. So I'm trying to look at the colours behind here. I'm just going to move my palette over. Blue palette and then the warm palette. So, oops. I'm just going to swap my waters over as well. So I've got my warm palette, water palette. And then I'm just going to go in with a brush. I am going to pretty much use this colour. It was a bit Naples yellow, wasn't it? But I'm just going to add a touch of this warmer yellow in it, because I think even as a background, that's slightly warmer. So let's see what happens if I add a touch of that to that. Still need it not to be too intense, because we've got all these other bright colours over the top of it, and then these very bright yellows coming up, but there seems to be a bit of brightness around it, so I'm not really worried about this blending either, so I'll work out whereabouts, I think, because obviously we've got lots of other cloud overlapping that stands kind of quite proud of it. They're quite these are a bit cumulusy, aren't they, these clouds here? They're a bit more kind of rain clouds, so a bit more, the shapes are a little bit more rounded. But I am going to just bring in a few. I'm kind of making that brighter in this middle area as well than it was at the end, by putting a bit more of the yellow. You could even go to a lemon yellow now if you've got that. Just adding a bit of white to that. I've still got quite plenty on my brush. I'm just building in. I'm going to leave a little, if I can, a bit of a gap where some of these lighter clouds come as well. And then we've got these ones coming above there again. They're more yellow. It's getting more yellow, obviously, as it gets nearer the sun. That's what's happening, isn't it? So I'm going to go straight to my cadmium yellow now, or you could use your lemon yellow. It's up to you. I'm going to really turn this right down with a tint. There we go. I'm going to paint those clouds just over the top. I have left a bit of a gap for them, but I don't actually need too much. And I'm going to also go in above, just above where these clouds are, and it starts to look a bit brighter, just a little bit there, with a bit more brighter cadmium yellow, sorry, in here, just to show we're just above the sun there. And then I'm pulling out just some of these, which should have started to dry anyway, this area underneath. I'm just starting to kind of bring out some of these bands of yellows that are starting to poke out a little bit just above. Now we've obviously got some other colours in there, like some purple, so I'm not doing loads, I'm just doing some. Kind of just, and this is what I was saying before, so we start to soften down some of these blue areas that we've got with all of these other colours that are coming in here. And I'm going to bring some of these other colours as well that I can see almost behind here. There's some brighter ones. And that's all we can do, is just to start to look at what colours we think we can see in there. You know, what's coming behind, because those purple clouds are over the top. These are all things that are right behind. And then I'm going to pop in some of these light coloured clouds. I'm going to make these really light now. It actually is more effective as well if we've got some of these bright yellow colours around where the white clouds are. It sort of frames them and makes them pop even more. So I'm just going around with that Cajun yellow and making it brighter here. And then going in with some white and a tiny touch of yellow. Very tiny. It's such a light tint, but it's just got that touch of warmth in it. Just a short touch of warmth in there. And again, I can go in, actually, you can go in really thick with that if you want to. So again, this has got a tint. This is a tint rather than just white. And then I will put the pop of that, the brightest area of the white. If you go in nice and thickly with it, it just stands a bit proud of that. There's a bit down here, a bit there. So wherever I can see it, I'm popping it. And again, all I'm doing, I've got a little round brush here, is just to kind of make the shape, because it's quite bright around that sun. And I'm just following over wherever else I can see. And if we want to soften it down, we can. So I'm going back over here. Now I can see that there is a bit of a contrast. It's a bit brighter. Just going to bring in some of these in. And again, I mean, you can just, if you wanted to just get you that, and this is like, you know, really helpful just to kind of soften the edges down if you're wanting to. It still feels a bit too, you know, too vivid. So what I'm going to do now, behind all of this, I'm just going to bring in some of these other yellows that I've mixed up and just pop a small amount wherever I can see them now, because I can see, it feels a little bit like some of these have just got some other pops of yellow I didn't see before, because it starts to open up when we're looking at particular colours, doesn't it? Yes, I'm looking along here, overlaps there. I think I'm going to put that on very last. So all these purpley colours here that are at the bottom, I'm going to put those on over the top before I go into the water. I'm going to concentrate on moving up with all these clouds. So I'm going to mix up all of these colours that I can see here. And now that this is dry, it'll be much easier to let those kind of blend into each other over the top. So again, it's like, what can you see? Now, so go in for whatever you can see. I'm going to go in with this purple, this magenta colour up here, but I'm going to have to just test it first because I can't really remember what colour it is. I'm going to need to use my blue based. And that's quite intense, isn't it? Although actually no, when it's thinned down, it's not. a bit thinner, so I might just use that in there. It's deciding, isn't it, how to layer it up, you know, what comes first. And underneath here, it feels like the yellowy peaches underneath, and then you've got the pink and then some kind of pinky purple in there. So I'm just going to mix up some of these colours again. So again with the pink, I'm just going to put this straight pink here. And I'll just mix it with my warmer tone. Make sure I've got plenty. Plenty ready. When we go over the top and kind of pop it over. The other thing is, of course, we're doing this over one session. If you decided you wanted to do a big canvas, you can do exactly the same process, but leave a day between the blues, then come back and do some of the bottom, you know, if it was a big painting, then come back and do another layer. And every day you can leave it and come back to it and add to it. The only, you know, the one of the reasons I'm making one bit dry is so that we get, you know, we can have a chance of kind of blending these and softening these down over one another over one session. Right, so again, I'm actually going to use a little bit of this Naples yellow that I've already used in this cloud here with a bit of cadmium yellow, and we've got these very bright bits of cadmium yellow as well, haven't we? So just mixing up some of that to paint that in. See? And again, it's just like testing the colours. I also want this real pop of yellow as well. Got some real brights in there above, haven't we? Just here. Really bright. Let's use that straight from the tube. And then I'm going to go and find a kind of a peachy one. So you can use a bit of yellow and a bit of red, and then a bit of white to make the tint up, make it a bit more of a tint, or I'm just sticking with my Naples yellow, but I have used plenty of times. I've used cadmium yellow and the warmer red together lots of times. But I'm just going to add a bit of the red into that. Just because I've got it on my palette really, rather than, you know, use it up. So test that colour. It's still quite, I might add a little bit more red, so it's why it's really quite helpful to test the colours. Okay, yeah, I'm feeling a bit more pinky. I might have to put a bit more red again still in there. And it's really, you know, it's down to what you prefer as well. Yeah, okay. So I've got there's quite a few colours there going on. I may even you just go in with this pop of purple. I think I will just go in with some nice pops of colour today, actually. So here we go. So what we're looking at is I'm working up of this clouds now, up here. I'm working at what comes underneath. So we've got, this is more complex, isn't it, on this bottom bit here? Because actually that yellow now overlaps some of the pinky colour behind it. So I think what I'm going to do is get some of this yellow in, and then overlap with the pink and the purple, and then come under here as well, and pop a bit of that pinky purple underneath whilst it's all still damp. So here we go. Go in. And then also there's this lovely streak here of kind of purpley pink again, isn't there? So I'm going to go just to see what happens here. make it kind of loose so that I can move it. And I'm only going to just start with a little bit because I don't know how it's going to end up just at the moment. But I know that there's definite cloud there, like that is this bright colour. So I'm just popping a bit of paint kind of whereabouts I want it to start with. And again, it doesn't have to be exactly where is on the picture. I'm going to go in with this brush now, just because it's dry underneath that line, and just kind of get that soft feel of the, but build up the colour on there. I may put a bit of pink on now. I'm looking, I'm thinking actually I'm going to pop a bit of that on as well, just to lighten it up a little bit on the in the middle. So we're just looking and observing and thinking, what do I want to pop on? You know, if do I want to deepen a colour? I think I do around here. Just using the edge of my brush there rather than the whole. Sometimes you can get in it, and sometimes it's just nice just to use a little edge of it. So that's kind of the tops, and I'm thinking about, you know, this is the only thing you get. Sometimes get the brush bristles in there. So again, it's going to start to change again shortly. So I'm looking over here. Between there, we've got this kind of like purpley colour. So I'm going to go in with my purpley colour. That feels a bit darker somehow. You go in with a bit of a slightly darker purple in there near the bottom. It's a bit more, got a bit, you know, you can put a bit of violet or a bit of pink together to kind of get the in-between bit if you want to. So what I'm doing here, I'm just going in. I might even put a tint of a small bit of white in there as well. So that gives it a like that lilac-y feel rather than so it's not quite as strong. That I'm going to. Mixing that, and I really like that colour actually, which means it's a yes. You know, when you do put some colour down, you think, oh, that is, I really like that. So go with the one you really like. So I'm just going to go in here and just starting to, and again, it might look patchy, but we've got a lot to go over the top, the cloud coming into it and everything, so don't worry. Just laying this colour down underneath and around. In between now, it comes a little bit, comes down here for sure. So again, just want to decide, you know, what comes first. And this is tricky because this has got yellow underneath it here. So let's get that in as well. And that's all we can do, really, honestly and truthfully, is just keep looking. So I'm going to go in with this peach colour over the top of this, of some of this cloud here. I'm just laying it out really with my brush. Just getting that on there. And bringing in a bit of this purple at the edge. And again, it doesn't matter too much because it does overlap. If it kind of runs into it, that's okay. Right, so again, I'm this time going to just soften that with my fingertip. I'm going to bring it out, bring it over. Softening that down that way. And a bit further. So when I'm now looking again, it's interesting how you start one area and then another, you know, you start to see where else it goes. But again, you can just use little brush marks where you just dabbing with your brush. Kind of like, you know, it's the underside, it's the highlighted side of those really dark clouds, isn't it? Kind of come round underneath, which are really nice. We're just bringing these, weaving them in all the time. Bits of cloud. And so this pink over the top. So we're just observing what colours we can see really and what we want to use as well. Just gives it a bit of colour there. When we get here, it's a bit experiment with some brighter colours in here. Yeah, you can kind of pull it over the edge, just push like that. What else have we got in here? Let's have a look. Okay, so yeah, I was sort of saying that some of these pinks and things are underneath, aren't they, almost around this top. So I'm just going to have a little observe what's going on here. I'm going to get some of these yellows and things in, and then the pinks over the top. So let's get some of those in. So I have a bit of Naples yellow there, which is the bit that's a bit further up here. So again, this is going to look a bit patchy. Don't worry about that at all, because we're just kind of working out how it all fits in. Again, softening that down, which is lovely. It keeps going up. I'm going to get this really nice bright layer of with the Cajun yellow, which is this one. We've got this white area here, and then we've got a lot of this really bright, much brighter yellow in there. And again, you can use lemon yellow. That's a really nice bright colour tone to use. Bit over this side as well. And we'll in a moment we'll get this meeting of all this middle area here, and then it'll start to kind of become a little bit more clear. So in here, I'm still going to weave through some of these lighter colours. You know, it's getting, we've got some light colours in here, like you can go in with a white or a white mix even. And again, you can even soften that down if you want. I'm not going to. I'm quite happy with having a little bit of a sharper edge in there somewhere. Just gives a bit of a nice contrast sometimes. And a bit of light colour over here. And this is where you get much more of this cloud that does look patchy, but you know, once we get all the overlay colours as well, they kind of thin out. So I'm going to pop those in now. So that'll cover some of this purple area that we put in. And that all starts to soften down a lot. Okay. And then I'm going to weave through some of these light colours again, these yellows and things. You can even, you know, if you think, oh, well, I'd like a pop of that yellow through there, then just, you know, by all means, pop it somewhere else as well if you want to. That's what I'm going to do here, because I do like these pops of colour in there. It doesn't cover as well. You can just add a bit more, you know, add it a bit more thickly, what you should do eventually. Okay, so all this going on, and then we've got these purples underneath. So it really does interlap, doesn't it? There's an awful lot of overlapping and underlapping. It's just really looking at what comes first, what's underneath, what's in there. So I'm kind of getting some of these colours now in these purpley colours in. between the two. Over here, I'm just going to get these purples in behind. Changes a bit over that side. And again, you know, you can just tap the edge or with your brush. So I'm just going to soften this down over here. So we can still see, you know, some of this coming through. And this blue coming through. And then we've got this, so building up now, I've got some of this yellow behind here, the peachy colours. Brighten this up a tad. And this is where, you know, it looks a little bit like it's kind of dragging, doesn't it? So you can kind of make those sideways shapes with your brush as well. And you swear, if you get a long straight bit, especially those sunbeams, you can pop some paint on and then pull it up with like the edge of a card or the edge of a ruler, like the thin edge of the ruler, and get those kind of streams of colours. So I'm going to go in now with some brights. I'm just looking at what I've got here. I think it's got to be sort of pink. I'm going to go in for the pinks here. It's almost transitioning because you've got pinks and yellow, so it's almost a bit peachy and a bit pinky. So I'm going to go in with what I think there. So here again now, it's over the top of here, all kind of blends, doesn't it? All blending together. And because that's still damp, that's still damp. I'm going with the edge of my brush there. And then again, I'm going to add back some of this, back in some of these yellowy colours that I can see. As I can see that is in there a little bit. And then again, so I'm going to soften that down with the edge. So then we're starting to really see the overlaps then. And much more now than we were to start with. And again, you know, you can put back other colours. So you know, if you lose, because we can sometimes lose the edge, and that's where, you know, using your finger will work really well actually, because you can just, I'll just be really careful with your brush, just so we can keep the you know, keep the density of the paint really over here. But then you can, you know, make those edges much more thin. And then I'm going to continue going because I'm working this area. I'm going to get much more purpley as we go to the top there. Because to me, look, that's how it's kind of transitioning to much more purple. Still quite vivid though. So just maybe mixing up some of the purple with some of the pink. Just going for it, just seeing. Let's try it on here, I think. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is just go in a tiny bit of that peachy colour. I might work one over the other actually, so I think I'll do that. I'm going to pop this on. This kind of keeps coming over the top of that of here. So we're getting all these layers. You won't be able to see that very well actually because I'm just thinking it on the screen because it's very damp. You can't see the colour building up, but that's okay. You will be able to when it's. So I'm just dabbing it on, and again, I'm just using the edge just to soften the edges. And then we can bring some of the colour back through again. So like I can see it's gone quite dark at the top. So I'm going to get some more of that peachy colour that I've been using and just dab it back on where I want it. And then again, oops, got a bit of paint and edge of paint there. And just go in and again, just kind of, we're just building it up, aren't we? We're building that misty colour up, which is lovely. And you can do it as much with intensity or as little as you want to. That's the beauty of it. I'll pop back a bit more purpley at the top there. Then I'll probably leave that because there's quite a lot of paint on there now, so that it doesn't kind of reach its capacity for the moment. I'll build this area of colour back up over here with a similar tone now I've got this because I like it. And again, popping a bit of that lighter colour through it. And it's just like trying with these different colours and seeing how it goes. So now we've kind of got, I feel like we're getting more of this area, but it's just this kind of bit to join and then moving across here. So again, I've got to look at this little bit in isolation really and say what's happening here. And again, I think we have the yellows underneath. I'm going to go back in with that same Naples yellow that I've been using. And just kind of place just start to place some of it. Kind of feels like it's a bit more in the middle here. Coming around like that. And there's this darker purple coming up the middle. I just realised I should maybe have brought this over a little bit, and I might still do that just to kind of get those softer edges at the end because it does overlap over the top there. So I'm just bringing that in here. And then some of these other colours, these pinks and things like that. So again, just decide what kind of a tone you want in there. And then you can go from there. I'm going to go for some similar pinks. I may even bring some of these lilacs in as well because I like those too. So I'm just going to dot in these around a little bit. Just get that. But again, you can use the edge of your finger. And again, you know, like some of these feel a little bit more directional across. So you can, you can kind of drag it a little bit. And even do that with a brush. You can just, roll your finger, just kind of just get that in the direction that it's going. And again, pop in some of the other colours that you can see. So we're starting to fill, well, it's not fill a gap, but, you know, starting to kind of create this overlap, which gets kind of makes everything just sit in place a bit more. So I'm going to go in with some lilac now. And what I've done there is I've just dabbed a small amount of paint on it, not much. And again, you know, this is where we are, isn't it? If you're feeling, join this little gap here. If you're feeling like you want to pop some of that colour back in, for example, then you can. Simple as that. We'll just pop a bit more in. And we're just continuing to just build up this lovely picture that we've got. Just, I think as we get to kind of almost where all these light bits are, we just got to be a little bit careful. That's where it can get a little bit saturated. So if it feels like it's getting too, you know, too damp or whatever, too wet, then just leave it to dry for a little while. And I'm just going to finish off here with a couple of light bits, you know, where it goes much lighter, much brighter. It's quite nice to have a few little light pops in there, isn't it? We've got this bright area here, of course. And look where this cloud is, and then sometimes you just get a little bit of a, you know, if it feels too bright, you can just soften that down a little bit again. It just weaves, makes, you know, makes your painting feel a little bit lighter in places, really. And a little bit down here, down the middle. Just dab it on with my brush, really. I'm not going to do too much to that. Look here. I'm just going to bring in some, just a little bit of the lightness here. I feel like I need to go and just put a little bit more colour in there. Sometimes it kind of, when you do another bit and the contrast, you think, ah, actually that could do with lightening up too. That's fine. It's kind of, it evolves like that, painting. Nice to have a little bit of a plan, but then just let it, you know, let it go and see, because we do often produce things that we wouldn't expect to produce when we're not thinking about it. So it's funny how it works. Okay, so my only little bit that I'm going to just change a tad. I'm going to bring some of this purple just out of this pink, sorry, not purple, out a little bit further over here. I'm just going to bring that. In fact, I'm going to bring it with a little bit of white. If we get the small Now this can be, like you can see now, my brush is probably getting a little bit too, so I could go in with a wet tissue or a bit of the sponge and just kind of soften that down as well, because we're getting really into softening things down now, aren't we? And there's so many ways we can do it. It's just lovely to experiment with them. You know, and I can actually apply that onto the paper or onto the sponge as well. Just a little bit there. Just brings a softness through. And we'll bring that colour down a bit, because I quite like that. It's quite light. Now then, this area here is the only one I'm feeling about for myself. I quite like to just kind of bring in some of that a little bit more naturally onto the edge. So I'm going to go back to that colour before I finish the little bits of cloud down here. And I'm just bringing that out. All I've got on my brush is water here. So it felt that it was going to a bit of a point there. So I'm just literally just with a brush with a tiny bit of water on it. Just kind of making it a bit thinner there, so it doesn't feel like it's too heavy. Just swirl it round, and it's quite translucent, and when there's just water on it, this is how you can get the edges of your clouds a bit like thinner. Okay, there we go. Okay, I'm just going to bring that in a little bit first. I've lost the colour a little bit. We soften, don't we? Soften and then add, soften and add. So we're retaining the colours and things that we really want. I'll bring that a little bit over here because I really like the colour. This is the thing that happens as well. Sometimes we think, oh, yeah, I'll add a little bit of that onto this area here too. So that looks quite light at the minute. I'm doing exactly the same again. I'm just going to make it a bit more translucent with just a bit of plain water and thin it out. It is very thin anyway. Okay. And you can do that if you feel it's too dark in any area, just lighten around the area a little bit, see what happens. Just make it yours. Right, so I'm going to go back to this area here, and then we'll make a little stop in a moment. I'm just going to make it a little bit, so I'm going to make it a little bit kind of two-tone there, with that brighter colour popping out as well. And we'll see. So I've got a bit of the other blue in there as well at the moment. Got the dark one, and I've got a slightly lighter tone in there as well. And what I'm going to also do is the same up here. I'm dotting it in a bit. It sounds a strange thing to do, but I just want a very light covering of the dark over the top, because it kind of feels like there's a big patch there at the moment. I'm just working it kind of around the edge of where I want it. And That's drying really fast actually. So I'm going to go back over that, those two colours. With that actually, just kind of just as it is, really like that. So yes, I mean, if we go on working into it, but there comes a point where we all need to kind of just stop a little bit with it. I'm just going to bring a bit of this in here. I've just done over there. It's quite like the effect. And just goes to show, you know, like you can let things dry off as well. In between, which is why you could leave quite easily leave a painting and come back to it, you know, and do another layer. So I'm quite happy with where I've got to with this. The only thing I haven't put on here is some of these, you know, some of these like purpley wispy kind of clouds at the bottom here. So I'm just going to go and mix up a bit of a lilac-y colour. I don't think I've got that. Yeah, pinky purple. So I'm going to go in with this. This one's a bit more violet, so it's a bit more blue based, but it's not too dark. And all I can do is swap my brushes over because I want it a bit warmer. All I can do really is I'm actually adding a bit of yellow to this here. So it's a bit of purple and a tiny bit of warm Cajun yellow. See what colour that looks like. Okay. See if it covers. And then I just want to go in with some of this cloud here just before I get to there. And I'm literally just going to dab that on. I'm going to just add a tiny bit of white to it to make it a bit of a tint in there. I have to add some more purple as well, and a bit more of that pink. I'm just creating what I feel looks like the cloud on at the top, just over the horizon there, just by making kind of little wiggly marks, really. It's just sitting above the horizon, isn't it? And that starts to make more sense then. And as soon as we get the land in, the water in, it's like, ah, yes. I knew something felt really out of place. So you can even put a bit of tape on here if that helps. To feel like it's creating, to feel like you've got water underneath it. As we go over here, because this is more in the shadow underneath the cloud, I'm going to go and get darker here. But I am going to take some of this and bring that over here because I've started it. But I feel like I want to just mist the edge off a bit, you know, like mist it up a little bit around the, just underneath where this very dark patch is here, because it does look a little bit paler somehow. So we're just observing like the change where the change is on. And I'm going to go much darker there. So I'm actually going to go in with some of my Payne's Grey. There's still a little bit of this lilac-y colour in. So I'm just going to look under here. I'm going to get some little lines on there, which are a bit lighter. But then I'm going to go in. I'm going to mix. You could use a violet colour, or you could use a bit of purple and a bit of your darker colour that you use, one of your dark colours in the sky. That's what I'm going to do. I'm getting a bit of this Payne's Grey and a bit of this lilac, and I'm just mixing that because it's kind of quite subtle, isn't it? It's not like it's not as dark as this blank cloud, but I want some balance in there. So yeah, so I'm just going in and we can soften the edges of this, even this bank of cloud here. So don't worry if you're going in and it feels a bit linear, because it is actually quite linear. But again, you can just soften the edge down a little bit with your brush, you know, with a little bit more water on, or a damp cloth. And just obviously there's a big rock in there. I won't put that one in yet. And then it does feel like there's more balance as well to the painting because of where this there's kind of a bit of repetition there. So that's quite nice. So it's whether you want to pop that in or not. I'm going to pop it in just because I think it would be a nice contrast. Very natural. I'm just wiggling my brush to get that fact that it's there. We kind of know it's a rock, really. We will do when we get the sea in place in the mow. And then this one here. Then when we get underneath as well, again, it'll make more sense. We've got all these lovely colours, haven't we? So I'm going in underneath a bit more, just a little bit like that, because this is almost a reflection in the sea now as well. So I'm going to take a pause there. I mean, with these clouds, you can even go in with a darker, you can say, make the centre a bit more dark, get some of the shadows in of where you get the tops of the, where these clouds are a little bit more heavy. You can just do that with a darker colour. And if you wanted to make a little bit more, make these colours a bit kind of more linear at the side, or put a light one through, you can do that as well. So I can go in with a really light, I'm going to go with a tint for this lilac here. Just going for it. Right, so just take a last pause before we think about the water. And it's starting to take shape. It will really take shape in this last 10 minutes when we get the water in, is where you'll get the biggest impact. So because as soon as that water's in, it all makes sense.